If you came here wondering whether eggs are actually safe for diabetics, whether they help or hurt your blood sugar and your A1C, you are in exactly the right place. This video is going to give you a precise, evidence-based answer, and more importantly, it's going to show you the specific rules that separate a breakfast that lowers blood sugar from one that quietly drives it up, even when the eggs themselves are not the problem. That last part is the key insight. Eggs contain virtually zero carbohydrates. On paper, they should have no direct impact on your glucose levels. And yet millions of diabetics report significant blood sugar spikes after egg-based breakfasts. So what is actually going on? If the eggs aren't the culprit, what is? And more importantly, once you understand the mechanism, could the same meal that used to spike your glucose actually become a therapeutic tool for bringing your A1C down? The answer to that last question is yes. And that answer is backed by a growing body of clinical evidence that many physicians are still catching up with. Here's something I want to leave you sitting with until the end of this video. There is one specific combination, a way of eating eggs that researchers have found can measurably reduce fasting, blood glucose levels overnight. Not in weeks, overnight. We'll get to exactly what that is and why it works biologically. But first, let me explain the framework. I've spent a considerable amount of time reviewing the peer-reviewed literature on dietary protein, lipid metabolism, and glycemic response in adults over 60. The physiology of blood sugar regulation changes significantly as we age, insulin sensitivity shifts, hepatic glucose production becomes harder to regulate, and the way dietary fat interacts with postprandial glucose response is more pronounced in older adults than in younger populations. So when I walk you through these 7 rules, understand that each one is grounded in that specific biological reality of the aging metabolic system. This is not general nutrition advice recycled from a 20-year-old food pyramid. This is targeted, mechanism-based guidance for your body, right now, at this stage of life. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Let's start with the foundation, because everything else builds on it. The first rule is that 2 to 3 whole eggs per day is not only safe for most diabetics, it is actively beneficial. For decades, conventional guidance told people with diabetes to limit egg consumption, largely due to concerns about dietary cholesterol and cardiovascular risk. But that guidance has been substantially revised. Multiple large-scale trials, including a 2020 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, involving over 8,000 participants, found no significant association between moderate egg consumption and increased cardiovascular risk in people with type 2 diabetes. What researchers did find was that the high-quality complete protein in whole eggs, all 9 essential amino acids, highly bioavailable, produces a robust and sustained satiety signal. This matters enormously for blood sugar management in older adults, because the hunger-glucose cycle is one of the most underappreciated drivers of glycemic instability. When you are genuinely satiated for 4 to 5 hours after a meal, you do not reach for the crackers, the juice, or the mid-morning granola bar. Protein-driven satiety breaks the snacking pattern, and that has a measurable downstream effect on average daily glucose load. Satiety is metabolic medicine, but here is where the first systemic connection becomes critical, and where most people go wrong. The egg itself is not raising your blood sugar. What is raising it, what is causing that puzzling post-breakfast spike, is almost certainly the fat used to cook it. This is the second rule, and it is probably the most clinically significant one in this entire video. When you cook eggs in butter, in bacon grease, or in large amounts of oil, you are adding a substantial load of saturated fat to that meal. And saturated fat, particularly in the quantities present in a typical American breakfast, triggers a well-documented physiological phenomenon called transient lipid-induced insulin resistance. Here is the mechanism. Saturated fatty acids, primarily palmitic and stearic acid from butter and animal fats, accumulate in skeletal muscle cell membranes within 2 to 3 hours of consumption. They activate a cellular signaling cascade involving diacylglycerol and protein kinase C-theta, which directly impairs insulin receptor substrate 1 phosphorylation. In plain language, the fat interferes with the molecular lock and key system that insulin uses to move glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. Glucose backs up. Your blood sugar rises, not because you ate carbohydrates, but because saturated fat temporarily made your cells deaf to insulin's signal. This effect is more pronounced in adults over 60. Aging muscle tissue already shows reduced mitochondrial density and reduced GLUT4 transporter expression, both of which lower baseline insulin sensitivity. When you add saturated fat on top of an already less sensitive system, the impairment is amplified. A diabetic over 60 eating eggs fried in butter is effectively stacking a pharmacological impediment to insulin function on top of a pre-existing metabolic vulnerability, and then wondering why their glucose is elevated. The solution is elegantly simple. Cook your eggs in a non-stick pan with no added fat. Hard-boiled eggs, poached eggs, or eggs prepared in a well-seasoned non-stick skillet without butter or oil produce virtually no saturated fatty acid load. The insulin-resistant signal is never triggered. Your body can process glucose normally. This single change, eliminating the cooking fat, has been reported by patients to produce noticeable improvements in post-meal glucose readings within days. The third rule extends this principle into the realm of systemic metabolic support through vegetable pairing. Eggs should consistently be accompanied by non-starchy vegetables: spinach, tomatoes, mushrooms, bell peppers, zucchini, asparagus, or leafy greens of any kind. This is not simply a nutritional bonus. It is a mechanistic intervention on glucose kinetics. The soluble and insoluble fiber in vegetables acts on glucose absorption at multiple levels simultaneously. In the stomach, dietary fiber increases chyme viscosity. The partially digested food becomes more gel-like, which slows gastric emptying. The stomach releases its contents into the small intestine more gradually, which spreads glucose absorption over a longer time window and flattens the postprandial glucose curve. In the small intestine itself, the physical presence of fiber creates a diffusion barrier between digestive enzymes and the food matrix, further slowing carbohydrate breakdown. And in the large intestine, fermentable fiber is converted by the gut microbiota into short-chain fatty acids, primarily butyrate, propionate, and acetate, that enhance systemic insulin sensitivity and reduce hepatic glucose output over the subsequent hours. This is the systemic connection that is so often missed. What you eat for breakfast affects your liver's behavior for the rest of the morning. A fiber-rich, protein-rich breakfast creates an enterohepatic signaling environment through gut hormones like GLP-1 and PYY, released in response to protein and fiber, that tells the liver to slow down its own glucose production. The liver does not operate in isolation. It is in constant biochemical conversation with the gut, the pancreas, and the muscle tissue. Every meal you eat sends a new message to that network. A well-constructed egg and vegetable breakfast sends the right message. The fourth rule concerns a nutrient that is frequently discarded out of misplaced health concern: the egg yolk. There is a persistent habit among health-conscious older adults of eating only egg whites, the rationale being that the yolk contains fat and cholesterol that should be avoided. This is one of the most nutritionally costly mistakes a diabetic senior can make. The yolk is where the egg stores nearly all of its bioactive micronutrients. Vitamin D is among the most clinically significant of these for diabetes management. Vitamin D receptors are expressed in pancreatic beta cells, the cells that produce insulin, and in insulin-sensitive tissues including skeletal muscle and adipose tissue. Adequate vitamin D status is associated in multiple prospective studies with improved insulin secretion, improved peripheral insulin sensitivity, and reduced inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. Vitamin D deficiency, which is extraordinarily common in adults over 60 due to reduced skin synthesis capacity and reduced dietary intake, is independently associated with worse glycemic control and higher A1C values. A single egg yolk provides approximately 37 to 44 international units of vitamin D, not a therapeutic dose, but a meaningful dietary contribution in the context of a population that is nearly universally deficient. More importantly, the yolk also provides choline, a nutrient that is directly implicated in hepatic fat metabolism. Choline is required for the synthesis of phosphatidylcholine, a key structural component of very low-density lipoprotein particles, which the liver uses to export fat. Without adequate choline, fat accumulates in liver cells, a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, and this hepatic fat accumulation is one of the most powerful drivers of hepatic insulin resistance and elevated fasting blood glucose. Eating the whole egg, yolk included, provides the raw material your liver needs to function properly as a glucose-regulating organ. Discard the yolk, and you are discarding the very nutrients that make eggs therapeutic for diabetes, rather than merely neutral. The fifth rule is one that has the most immediate and measurable impact on a specific metric that diabetics monitor closely. Fasting blood glucose, the number you see when you test first thing in the morning before eating anything. Eating eggs at dinner, in place of high-carbohydrate staples like pasta, white rice or bread, can measurably reduce that fasting glucose reading by morning. Here is the physiological explanation. During the overnight fasting period, the liver is the primary source of glucose in the bloodstream. It does this through a process called hepatic glucose output. The liver converts stored glycogen and amino acids into glucose and releases it into circulation. In people with type 2 diabetes, this process is dysregulated. The liver continues to produce and release glucose even when blood glucose is already elevated, a phenomenon sometimes called hepatic glucose overproduction. It is one of the key reasons fasting blood glucose in diabetics tends to be higher than in non-diabetic individuals, and it is a major contributor to elevated A1C values over time. What determines how aggressively the liver behaves overnight? In large part, what it was fed for dinner. A high-carbohydrate evening meal produces a significant insulin spike, which the liver responds to by refilling glycogen stores to near maximum capacity. When overnight fasting begins and blood glucose starts to drop, a maximally loaded liver begins releasing glucose immediately and aggressively to compensate. The result is a measurably higher fasting glucose in the morning. A dinner built around eggs and non-starchy vegetables produces a far smaller insulin response and leaves hepatic glycogen stores at a lower level of repletion. Overnight fasting glucose production from the liver is less aggressive. Less glucose accumulates in circulation while you sleep. You wake to a lower fasting reading. Over weeks and months, consistently lower overnight glucose translates directly into a lower A1C. This is not a theoretical benefit. This is a reproducible, clinically logical consequence of understanding how the liver talks to the rest of the metabolic system and choosing your dinner accordingly. The sixth rule addresses meal sequencing, which is an area of growing clinical interest in the management of postprandial glucose. If your breakfast or any other meal includes a slice of whole grain bread, and whole grain is the only carbohydrate source worth including in this context, eat the bread last, after the eggs and vegetables. Protein and fiber consumed at the beginning of a meal trigger a preemptive hormonal response from the gut. Gastric inhibitory polypeptide and GLP-1 are released in response to early arriving protein. These hormones slow gastric emptying, stimulate appropriate insulin secretion from the pancreas in proportion to the glucose load that is coming, and prime the peripheral tissues for glucose uptake before that glucose ever arrives. By the time the bread is eaten and its carbohydrates begin to break down into glucose, the entire absorptive and regulatory machinery has been pre-activated and buffered. The glucose curve from the bread is significantly flattened compared to a scenario in which the bread is eaten first on an empty stomach. Studies on meal sequencing, including well-designed trials from Weill Cornell Medicine, have demonstrated that eating vegetables and protein before carbohydrates can reduce postprandial glucose peaks by as much as 30 to 40% compared to eating the same foods in the reverse order. The total glucose entering the bloodstream is identical. What changes is the rate of delivery, and that rate is everything in the context of insulin capacity. This is a free, zero-cost intervention with no side effects. It requires no new foods, no supplements, no additional expense. Simply eat your eggs and vegetables first. Wait until they are nearly finished before touching the bread. The seventh and final rule is protective rather than prescriptive. It concerns the foods that must be systematically eliminated from egg-based meals. Not reduced, not minimized, but removed entirely. Bacon, sausage, white bread, hash browns, and processed breakfast meats are the standard supporting cast in a traditional American breakfast. Each of these foods, in the context of diabetes management, is pharmacologically harmful in a specific and well-characterized way. Bacon and sausage are dense sources of saturated fat, and in most commercial preparations, significant sources of sodium and advanced glycation end products, compounds formed when protein and fat are exposed to high heat, which promotes systemic inflammation and directly impair endothelial function and insulin receptor activity. White bread and hash browns are high glycemic carbohydrate loads that produce rapid glucose spikes. Consumed together with eggs, these foods do not simply add to the glycemic burden, they compound it. Saturated fat from the bacon impairs insulin function, just as a high glycemic carbohydrate load arrives, creating a scenario where glucose cannot be cleared efficiently from the bloodstream at precisely the moment when the body most needs to clear it. The biochemical result is a prolonged and elevated postprandial glucose curve, one that can persist for 4 to 5 hours, damaging endothelial cells, promoting glycation of hemoglobin, and raising the oxidative stress burden on every organ in the body, including the kidneys, eyes, and peripheral nerves. These are the organs that bear the long-term consequences of chronically poor glycemic control. Diabetic nephropathy, retinopathy, and peripheral neuropathy are not random misfortunes. They are the accumulated damage of thousands of individual postprandial glucose excursions. Removing these foods from egg-based meals is not a minor dietary preference. It is a decision that alters the downstream inflammatory and glycemic trajectory of your body over years. The eggs, prepared correctly and paired correctly, are a powerful metabolic ally. Surrounded by their traditional breakfast companions, they become part of a meal that works against you at every level. When you put all 7 rules together, 2 to 3 whole eggs daily, no added cooking fats, paired with non-starchy vegetables, including the yolk, timed strategically at dinner when appropriate, with bread eaten last, and traditional high-fat accompaniments removed, what you have is not simply a healthier breakfast. You have a systematically constructed metabolic intervention that works simultaneously on fasting glucose, postprandial glucose response, hepatic insulin sensitivity, pancreatic function, inflammatory burden, and micronutrient status. Patients who apply these principles consistently report reductions in A1C that their clinicians describe as meaningful, typically in the range of 0.3 to 0.7 percentage points attributable to dietary changes alone. That may sound modest, but an A1C reduction of 0.5 points is clinically equivalent to the effect of some pharmaceutical interventions, and it comes with no side effects, no prescriptions, and no additional cost. It comes from understanding the biology and acting on it with precision. The egg has been blamed for problems it did not cause. The butter was guilty. The bacon was guilty. The white toast and the hash browns were guilty. The egg, properly prepared and properly paired, has been waiting patiently for an accurate evaluation, and the clinical evidence now delivers one. You came here with a question about whether eggs are safe. The more accurate question and the more powerful one is whether you are getting the full metabolic benefit that eggs are capable of providing. After this video, you know exactly how to answer that. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time. And leave a comment below, tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar? Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called the Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second. And it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.